Good afternoon, everyone, and firstly, welcome to the Performance Summit. I hope you're enjoying the experience so far. This is the first virtual summit organised by Launch Metrics to discuss the future of brand performance in the fashion, luxury and beauty industries. So thank you for joining us discussion today. The session will focus on influencer marketing, how to stay relevant, creating relatable content with key opinion leaders. So speaking on this topic today, we have an amazing panel of women who are all experts in their field, and the session will be moderated by Jill Ryder, who is our Influencer Services Manager here at Launch Metrics. The session itself will be 30 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A with questions that we've already collected from our social media and networks. So don't hesitate to participate on the chat or the real-time polls and share the experience in social media through the hashtag Performance2020. So that said, let me welcome to the stage our panelists and hand this off to Jill, who will then make the introductions.
Hi, everyone. So welcome to the session. We're delighted to have you all join today. And so this webinar, as Ekta mentioned, we're discussing how to stay relevant when it comes to influencer marketing. So we've got a great panel for you, and I'd love to do a quick intro round to get everyone kind of acquainted. So yes, if you guys could all join the webinar, that would be amazing. And I will get you acquainted with our audience today. Got Rashna join, everyone coming in. And Rena as well. I'm just waiting on Candice. Amazing. Okay, so we've got everyone here. I'll start with you, Rena. If you could give us a quick introduction about where you're based during this time and also your role within the industry.
Thanks, Jill. I'm Rena. I head up influencer marketing at Pinterest across UK, Canada, Australia, and I'm based in London for now.
Amazing. Candice?
Hi, I'm Candice O'Brien. I run the Wall Group in London and currently in London. Had to double think that.
And Rashna?
Hi, I'm Rachna Shah. I run KCD, which is a PR and digital and creative services agency. And I am based in New York, not locked down as fully yet, hopefully.
Yeah. You know, it's almost like we should introduce the lockdown measures just to give a little bit of context. Great. Well, we're excited to chat to you all today. So, I mean, what we're looking at now today is a time when digital has really had to accelerate at an unprecedented rate when it comes to social media and online retail. And like every other industry, influencer marketing has had to stay really agile and adapt to that shift in the way that consumers are seeking inspiration as they shop, really. So people are really looking to influencers, brands and publishers for that almost like real-time social commentary, relatability and true value, like never before, really. So I guess we've seen that real shift with brand and influencer strategies just having to almost dramatically kind of restructure since the start of the year. And I'd love to actually hear about your individual shifts that have happened since January 2020 and how you've had to kind of like maybe rejig some things. So yeah, if you could maybe start with telling us how this is kind of panning out. Is it maybe business back to usual by this point? And I'll turn to you, Rashna, for the start.
Hey, no, it's definitely not business as usual. I think that, you know, this was the year of throw out some of the usual ways of doing things, experimenting, you know, being a little bit less afraid in some ways to try something new, right? But at the same time, there was a growing fear about how things would be viewed. There was such a, you know, an eye on what is everyone doing, what are brands doing. But I think ultimately that the ones who succeeded or the ones who felt like they got the most out of it, they were focusing their energies on building their community, right? In all different ways, and we'll talk about that more, on entertaining. I think that was a big part of success over this time period. And then growing their audience, because a lot of the usual ways to grow audience, i.e. Fashion Week, didn't exist. So how do you actually build an audience when no one is like celebrating your industry or your brand or your world right now? There are obviously much bigger issues in the media that are distracting everyone.
Exactly. No, definitely. And actually, Rena, I'll kind of come up to you from the creator side of Pinterest. What are the biggest shifts in strategy you've had to make?
So as a business, Pinterest has actually done really well this year. And I think that as everyone is trying to navigate the new normal, which is a phrase that I hate saying now, it's just been the phrase of 2020. But, you know, everything is different, from trying to set up a home office to trying to cook at home, childcare and things like that. So increasingly people are coming to Pinterest to look for that content. So we've seen user numbers really grow and grow as the year develops globally. But in terms of how we work with influencers, I think that there was definitely a moment of pause when, you know, the super glam shots, particularly within fashion beauty, they just were very jarring as people were hibernating from home. So we actually launched a campaign back in April, spanning April, May, called Stay Inspired, where we worked with our biggest and best creators across the globe. We looked at the search data and search spikes and trends that we were seeing, and were super transparent with our creators. And what we found is that they wanted to create useful content, they wanted to help people, and there was that emerging sense of community, everyone banding together. And through the last few months, I've seen a lot more, I guess, purpose with content. A lot of it is inspiring, it's educational, it's helping people to do something, achieve something, try something, which actually marries pretty well into Pinterest's mission, which is to help everyone to create an inspiration, to help give everyone the inspiration to create a life they love. And in terms of how we work with influencers, that was a very sharp pivot. And I think 2020 is the year of adapting and pivoting strategy. So we were typically working very face-to-face. We would do events pretty much on a monthly basis. Obviously, that's not happening anymore. Everything's kind of virtual events, meetups, webinars, and that sort of thing. And we're very much not back to normal. Just as a business, we want to safeguard everyone. So we're sticking with virtual events for the foreseeable, just so people aren't put at risk, because it's so tricky now, particularly UK coming in and out of lockdown. In Australia, some of the lockdown measures for specific states were very strict as well.
Okay. Amazing, though, that you've had the kind of almost silver lining of that, but it's good to hear. And then Candice, from the talent side, how has this affected the Wall Group strategy since, I guess, February, March? Like, what's the biggest shifts you've had to make, you know, managing digital talent?
Well, I mean, back in March, pretty much everything was cancelled. We saw slowly, it was like an extremely slow car crash happen with all our jobs. You know, we work across, you know, Fashion Week, red carpet, and everything had just frozen. But it then meant that our talent was, you know, they were stuck at home, but then they leaned more into the creative content and focusing on their, you know, their own social media. So some of them learnt how to be on TikTok, you know, lots of live on Instagram, as everyone was doing at that time. And then beauty had, you know, proven to be such a huge kind of self-care during quarantine that allowed many artists to show consumers how to use products and learn techniques at home. And as we go into the second lockdown, sadly, I think we don't feel as terrified as a business as we did back in March. I feel like we've learned how to navigate, and we feel quite confident in being able to, you know, push and generate revenue in this kind of new era. Fingers crossed.
Good. Yeah, it's kind of got some good and tough challenges. That's interesting. And I guess kind of leading on almost from Rena's point there, we were kind of noticing that real widespread need for positive and authentic content since earlier the year, because, you know, since the beginning of lockdown, we've seen multiple brands producing that real at-home content. As you said, the sense of community is huge and kind of almost like localized community. And I guess then as the year went on, with a few more social issues that sprung up as well. And I suppose in the last few years, we've seen, you know, Gen Z really directing their spend towards brands who are really, you know, communicating solid ethics and positive supply chains. And I think what we're seeing now is just those influencers also becoming more conscious of the brands they're partnering with, and, you know, that kind of awareness. And I guess, Rashna, I'd love to kind of hear from you. Is this something that you're seeing, like brands almost become more conscious of when they come to you for your strategies? Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Roshna. Yeah.
The downfalls of Zoom. Yeah, it's really, especially, I mean, you know, here in the US, everywhere, but the news cycles here, the past spring and this fall, I mean, it is so important to develop these authentic voices. And it's so obvious now when a brand is, you know, not being conscious, not being modern, not understanding the community that they, you know, cater to, or that they're trying to attract. And so, you know, it's super important that the brands and the influencers are both taking that filter and using that as a guide for themselves. And I think there have been much more conversations when we are engaging with influencers about, you know, how is the brand approaching this, or why are they doing this way, or who else is involved, or, you know, and I think that that's relevant. I think, you know, it's our duty to strategically address those things in putting together a plan. But then, you know, it's nice that like the influencers want to engage in this more authentic way, not just because, oh, this is the brand and here's the product and I could just do this. Like, it feels like more of a conversation now.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a little bit, it's a huge positive thing that's come out, because even with ourselves, we were working with a brand who had to pause activity during, you know, COVID. And we went back into the last kind of stretch of the campaign, having more authentic messaging, kind of an acknowledgement of the social situation. And maybe they would never have spoken about that before, rather than that real kind of, you know, typical product push. But there was a real kind of contextual, almost like a kind of a collective, oh, we all know that like there's some crazy stuff going on. So yeah, I guess it's only a good thing to kind of raise that awareness. And I guess, Rena, when you're chatting to your creators like day to day, has this become something you've noticed with even the content they're producing? Have they become more, I suppose, like focused on providing actual positive impact rather than just kind of, here's the latest, you know, thing we want to talk about?
Yeah, we see that massively on Pinterest because we're seen as such a positive place. There's no trolling comments, no negativity really. It's people sharing their passions and things that they're super into, which is always going to be a positive like conversation and connecting with the community there. But I think looking at Gen Z, it's really interesting how much they're pushing for change. And I really admire their passion just in wanting that authenticity and wanting to hold brands, influencers, publications to a much higher standard. I think for kind of smaller micro influencers, it's a lot easier to kind of stand by your values. I've seen a lot of micro influencers pivoting to sustainable fashion, diversity and inclusion, looking at zero waste lifestyles, and influencers who aren't typically within those very narrow niches, but they bring it into kind of the wider content that they do around fashion, beauty, or even within travel, looking at sustainable travel and minimizing your carbon footprint. I think for the larger influencers, it's slightly trickier. If you look at people like Grace Beverley, she's very transparent with her company and sustainable practices, but she actually receives some negative comments around that, which she's really thoughtfully addressing on her stories and building that narrative. But I find it quite kind of concerning that she's getting negative comments around her push for sustainability and building an inclusive company as well. But influencers hold so much power in changing policy, changing companies, changing attitudes. And I think that there are more people leaning into who they are as a person, their authenticity, what gets them up in the morning, and that purpose. And it feels like a real moment for change where we're kind of building for a better future now.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point to make, is that it is definitely a collective like consciousness shift almost. But it's definitely a time, it's almost like kind of a teething time where we're trying to, it's almost like there's a lot of like challenging, this kind of cancel culture type of situation. And we just want to make sure that it gets back to the like, making sure that we're pushing forward rather than just attacking all the time. So I think it's like a little bit of a phase of, weeding out a bit of that, and then hopefully moving towards, things really, pushing for more positive impact. And I guess then it's really interesting kind of thing that we wanted to talk about was the shift towards, I suppose, the types of influencers that brands are looking to partner with at the moment, because we saw at one point an industry shift towards, more of an up and coming, almost unknown micro influencer. But now we're actually observing a lot more brands leveraging that all-star mega influencer. And in fact, our recent marketing reset report, we actually saw that the media impact value generated by these all-star influencers was increasing by 10% in 2020. So we thought this was quite an interesting kind of data point to see that during this time, there seems to be a lot more leveraging of these kind of higher profile talent. And Candice, I might actually turn to you. Have you kind of had maybe brands being interested in more high profile stylists and makeup artists during this time rather than kind of lesser known names? Or have you experienced any of that during this time? Oh, sorry, you're on mute. Good.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, we've had, we've definitely found an increase in brands wanting to work with, our talent creating content, like obviously hugely since March. Recently, a project we worked with for UGG was a social media campaign and it was using the stylists and their relationships as they, wanted to change the perception of who the UGG audience was. And I think it was a pretty successful campaign from what I saw, and it was interesting the talent that they chose. And the kind of audience they had, more kind of music relevant, younger, kind of a little bit more streetwear rather than kind of necessarily the luxury red carpet artists that I would have necessarily thought that they would want to work with. And I mean, that's just an example of, a brand using our talent in that way. I think that we have found that the most value is the longer lasting brand partnerships that kind of are authentic and true to the artist again, as you were saying. And one is our makeup artist Naoko Shinto. She's just been partnered with Armani, and another hairstylist of ours, Lee Keats, with John Frieda. And both of them had really, really, really long-standing relationships, and it organically evolved into a partnership. So,
Yes, that could be the trend towards like more long-term investment rather than, those kind of mass partnerships, perhaps. There's that kind of, you need that foundation and we're building on it throughout the year. So definitely interesting. And also, we
have found that I do think that all the brands that do come to us wanting to work with our talent, they are specifically wanting a certain talent, and the partnerships always make sense. So they have really thought about it, and I think there's so much knowledge now with with a company like Launch Metrics. There's so much information that they actually know the audience that our talent has, so it's easier, I think, to align, and then for it to then be more authentic, I think, too.
Yeah, you've kind of got the data, and then also I guess the authenticity of the partnership. And I guess then, Rashna, in terms of your perspective on this from the brand side, have you seen the kind of PR marketing investments shift towards kind of different types of influencers, higher profile names?
I think that brands are definitely much more open to having a two-tiered or multiple-tiered approach, right? So because it's like everyone accomplishes something different. The larger influencers are attracting global awareness to a campaign. They're reaching a very stable audience, but how much of that audience is specifically for this brand, right? Like you're taking that chance of not knowing how much engagement you're going to get on their channel. Then you have the micro influencers where they can really build your community. They can really help because they have a specific interest that is connected to your brand. So you can feel like, I use actually editors as a good example of this a lot, because their numbers are not going to necessarily be as high, or most of them are not as high, but you know, the people who are following them are, you know, reading their articles in fashion magazines, or looking at their Instagram for, you know, what's new, or getting shopping advice. So it's very specific for this purpose, you know, so they're a more knowledgeable, engaged audience. The other thing that we've seen is brands or influencers with big followings creating these secondary accounts where they can then engage with a smaller community. So someone like Tyler Mitchell, the photographer, right, has like his brand account, and then has another one that's more of a kind of research, ideation, like brainstorming, you know, much less followers, but it's more about connecting to the followers. So you may see that with different influencers, you know, over time, where there's one that's a little bit more of a brand representation, but then something else they're using to engage with their community more on a micro level. So there's a couple of, you know, there was like a K-beauty brand, it's called Glow Recipe, that did that, where like they created that's a smaller subset Instagram account that's private, where they invited people in. And I know Catherine Power and the Who What Wear brand, they did this when they launched Versed, is that they had a smaller community called the Good Skin Crowd that they were, you know, polling or asking advice or seeing how people were chatting about their beauty problems, et cetera. And it helped them then kind of decide, you know, what products they should prioritize, or what were people's needs, or how were they reacting to things. So I think it's interesting that it's like not only about brands looking small and big, but also brands or influencers themselves realizing they may have to subset their audience.
Yeah, I love that, actually. That's really kind of, it's exploring kind of the different aims for different kind of voice channels, I guess. And I think that is super interesting, because it's something that I feel like there's that aspiration and inspiration you get from these, you know, top tier, and then there's that really relatable kind of community aspect that you're going to get from those, like, I suppose, almost like closed groups, really, which I feel like have definitely evolved out of lockdown. I even know myself, I'm definitely joining a lot more groups than I usually have. And so great. Yeah, really good insight there. I guess, Rena, it'd be cool to also hear about why you think maybe there is a little bit of a shift towards that, you know, higher profile and voice in the industry. If you had any opinion on that, like, what are these consumers maybe looking for from these larger, almost like celebrity? There's been such a huge increase in media impact value coming from, you know, Kylie and all these kind of different and very well-known names in the industry at the moment.
I think particularly this year, people, kind of consumers, are turning to those kind of mega influencers, kind of celebrity status, because they have become a new form of entertainment. You know, everyone's got kind of Netflix fatigue. You've gone through everything. You've gone through the other streaming platforms as well. But with those kind of large scale influencers, because it's their full-time job, they have just been creating content across multiple platforms, sharing more insight into their lives. And it's kind of a win-win, because as a consumer, you kind of get an insight into how other people are living their lives. Maybe they've developed a new morning routine, which has helped them kind of through lockdown, and it's something that you can adopt. But for those influencers, they're then building up kind of that community and that affinity with people, and it feels very personal, it feels very close. And I think the influencers who have above, say, 500k followers on Instagram, they tend to lose a little bit of that engagement compared to the micro influencers, but through sharing so much of their lives, they're building that back again. And in a previous role where I worked with influencers on campaigns within the fashion world, we actually worked similar way to what's been said previously, where we worked with kind of tier one talent on the kind of more celebrity side. So looking at people like will.i.am, Leomi Anderson, and that was on a year-long contract, because, you know, if you do a one and done campaign with someone of that stature, you're one of a long list of brands they're working with, and it just doesn't seem genuine. I think consumers are getting a lot more savvy with kind of how influencers are monetizing, and they want to know that they can trust that person's opinion. It's why they started following them in the first place. So I think brands typically will be investing more in longer term partnerships with those influencers. But to Rachna's point, you do also still want to engage those micro influencers. And you know, there are people similar to editors or other kind of people within the industry who have a super powerful voice, might not necessarily have the numbers that correlate, but that's why a nuanced approach to influencer marketing is so important. You know, there are some industry people who I would call your favorite influencer's favorite influencer. They get in there ahead of the trends. They know what's coming up because they work in that industry, and their impact actually is super broad, but it might just not be reflected in the numbers. And within kind of the Pinterest world, we're slightly different. We're a lot more democratic. So we work on a content graph rather than a social graph. It doesn't really matter how many followers you've got, as long as your content is good, inspiring, engaging, that can be shown to potentially millions of people. We've got over 400 million monthly active users for Pinterest at the moment. So there's a huge opportunity. And I work with influencers across kind of the whole spectrum, and there are small micro influencers who may not see success on other platforms. They've got, you know, less than 10k followers on Instagram, but they create beautiful, thoughtful, helpful content. And on Pinterest, they see huge success reaching millions of people. And actually it becomes their main platform. If they're a blogger, they get the bulk of their traffic through Pinterest, and the other social platforms are a little bit less important to their mix. They have kind of a presence on everything because, you know, you need to have a multi-platform strategy as a creator, but they kind of shift their priorities between platforms and see what they're getting out of it.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting to kind of hear that approach compared to, I suppose, what we've probably seen in like Facebook and YouTube and those algorithms. So it's definitely something to bear in mind for creators when they're looking at Pinterest. It's really, really, I love the way it's kind of focused on value. And I think that that's so true about the multi-tiered, nuanced approach, because there is so many different kind of aspects to the different voices. And I totally agree with that multi-tiered approach. And I think you're right with those top tier talent. It's like they're almost becoming more personalized. They were forced into it almost during lockdown, and that's probably where they're going to see their engagement rising. But totally agree with having the community building aspect as well with the micros. So yeah, definitely some really interesting perspectives there. And I guess let's kind of turn to a little bit more about how audiences are consuming compared to before. So, I mean, if we think about how people are shopping, you know, we're all looking for product information and inspiration on our desktops and like our mobiles, like way more than before. I know it was definitely shifting way more to online, but when we think about how it used to be like almost like an online offline hybrid type of consumption pre-social distancing, and there really is kind of that almost like greater demand for YouTube and video content. And we saw that that was really generating higher levels of media impact value as well in our reports since March. So I'd love to kind of ask if you guys have experienced that kind of increase in demand for video content as part of creative briefs. And I guess as well, we're seeing a lot more repurposing of this video content. It's definitely IGTV, Instagram video, Instagram ads, because I think it's really providing more personalized engagement. And Candice, I'll start with you. Have your talent experienced an increased demand for video content in your creative briefings since the beginning of the year, do you feel?
Yeah, we've definitely experienced a rise in requests for video, like video content for the artists, but it has been across not only editorial, but with the brands. You know, I think it's also been, when we were in our really tight lockdown, it was also difficult for brands' editorials to create the content, so had to then look to the talent to then be doing it in their own homes. You know, I think also with salons shutting down, we saw a huge rise of asks of like DIY, from nails to at-home haircuts to facials, and you know, brands were wanting to collaborate with the talent in regards to that. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's good. So definitely room for investing in video, video production. And I guess Rachna as well, have you kind of felt from your side like a demand in video strategy come in?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you can tell how much better it performs, or, there's more value in it. However, what's great is that it doesn't have to be as polished. Right.
Yeah.
Like now it's us talking, it's, people chatting. Susie Bubble did a great thing during some of the shows for couture, I think. And then maybe we should do it again for women's, like, a group of them hanging out, chatting, talking about their reaction to a new collection launch. It certainly was very different from the getting dressed and getting our photos taken outside of a show. And, so I think what's nice is that it's not as produced. And so it's much more, and I mean, people are good at taking videos of quality, but you feel the authenticity from the video itself, which is great for a brand. And then I would say the other thing is like the interaction. We work with Brandon Maxwell. He did a phenomenal job. He wasn't trying to, but on just reaching out to the community and having these like nightly talks. He was helping students with their fashion projects. He was, just commiserating over lockdown and life and and he had some of the best e-com sales of the brand's history this past spring. So there's something about that engagement that can be more personal, and people don't have to feel like, oh, I need a crew and I need to set this up and how will I film it and what will people think of it? I think we're used to seeing people without makeup, just in bed talking. I mean, someone was laughing with Brandon, like, do you ever get up? It seems like you're always filming in bed. He's like, no, it's just, that's the time that I do these things. But, and I think there was a lot of good use of repurposed content too. So from a brand perspective, like Balmain, who we work with, did a great job of kind of using content that we had created before to do like maybe look backs, or, Olivier would like kind of look at like his favorite pieces from before, moments of the brand, et cetera. And people like wanted to engage in that again, because it certainly looked more exciting than what we were all doing in our home currently. So I think there was a lot of opportunity to repurpose content too.
Yeah, that's so cool, actually. And I think it kind of humanifies like influencers as well. Like it's also very funny. And I think, that's something that everybody wants. It's almost like, it's definitely more lifelike, relatable. And again, we are seeing like celebrities and influencers in kind of, their day-to-day clothes without makeup. And it definitely makes it more, I definitely feel more closer to, people I follow, and seeing also the inside of their homes and all that kind of thing. So, and the video is, I mean, it's definitely something I have increased in terms of consumption. And as you said there, like, yeah, it's definitely a bit more personalized. So it's cool to kind of hear about the e-com sales as well. And I guess that's where it can be the opportunity for brands to keep in mind. Cool, great. I guess we're going to, now that we've touched on a bit more opportunity, it is good to kind of look and see what we've got kind of coming up the year ahead. So, Rena, I know this probably is, as you said, you've had a huge amount of usage increase on Pinterest. And again, it is somewhere that people seek inspiration. And you've already launched some great features this year. I've read a bit about the new ones that are helping to support kind of having more of an influencer or a presence in the influencer community. Can you talk a little bit more about these features and how they can help brands and creators, I guess, collaborate more on Pinterest in the future?
Of course. So I feel really lucky actually to work for Pinterest, because we really recognize and value influencers. We often say that without influencers, there would be no Pinterest, because people come to us looking for that content. So as a company, we're very committed to building for influencers, and we've launched a bunch of things to improve the experience, to give creators new ways of connecting with their audience. So some quite functional things. So we have a business hub. When you kind of log onto the Pinterest account as a business account, you'll kind of reach this hub area, which has articles that help you set up kind of best practices and things like that. You can see your top line stats. So at a snapshot, you can see whether you're creating really great engaging content. Hopefully everyone is. You can see the best performing pins as well. We also know how important it is for creators and also brands actually to engage with their audience. So we have an area called the engagement tab. So instead of going into each pin that you've published, you go into the tab, and that's essentially a stream of comments, likes, reactions to your content, so you can reply to them all then and there rather than kind of hopping between different pieces of content. We also have a trend tool which looks at our data. So, with over 400 million monthly active users, we've got a ton of data about what people are searching for and what they're interested in. So we're transparent with brands and creators. They can access the tool, look back for the last 12 months, but also they can see emerging trends as well to help them get a bit ahead of the curve and create content that is going to resonate with our users in 2 weeks' time, a month's time, which is really helpful. We also shopping is a really big focus for us. So we've launched a range of new features around shopping feeds to help engage brands. This past Fashion Week, I did a nice project with the likes of Victoria Beckham and a couple of other London-based brands, just working to bring their presence onto Pinterest. And then, everyone's so commercially minded, particularly with the first 6 months of this year not going great. So, we wanted to help those brands reach a new audience, but also to tie in social commerce as well. And this isn't so much on the brand influencer side, but we also launched a feature called skin tone ranges, because double clicking into the world of beauty, we know that for women of colour, it's very difficult to find products, particularly makeup products, that suit your skin tone. So if you and I were both looking for, I don't know, a purple eyeshadow, I would need something way more pigmented than you. So if we were looking for those looks, we type it into the search bar, and there are little bubbles that come up with different skin tone ranges. So I can select the skin tone range that more closely matches my skin, and then the search results will update with content that is particularly for my skin tone, and that will be a range of products, techniques, how to get the look, and we want to build a more inclusive product generally, but particularly within beauty, it's so pertinent. So yeah, lots of things that have launched and lots of things coming up next year too.
That's super interesting. I love how you're focusing more on the social commerce, because I was just even thinking with shopping for cosmetics, really hard to do online, especially when you can't go in store and try a sample. So that all sounds really great. I'm excited to see them all launch, and I'll definitely check them out. Thanks, Serena. And then I guess, Candice, because I'm thinking about how digital has impacted your business this year with it accelerating so much, and given that your talent are obviously, hugely big experts in the field, like professional stylists, makeup artists. How do you balance basically maintaining their profile as an influencer, but also making sure that you leverage the right opportunities for them as stylists? Have you found that to be a challenge as digital has just become taken over this year?
I think, the talent that we represent are all artists first, and then they become influencers through their artistry and their expertise. I think digital has given, consumers to give a peek behind the curtains, and the ability to find out about their favorite editorials or celebrity and or the celebrity looks, or, and social media has helped build many of our talents' profiles, and some of them have been super savvy and expanded their careers in that area, but then some haven't. But us as managers, we work with the brands and on partnerships to help make sure that we can guide them and with the right projects and new avenues, and that could be guiding them towards helping build a YouTube channel or a masterclass series, so whatever it is digitally in that space. But I think just in answer to your question, it is really important that they understand that space, but we are, fundamentally they're artists first, not influencers.
Yeah, just by getting the right tools. But I think it's amazing that they are the artists first, and I think that's what makes them quite special as well. So yeah, that's great. Okay, and I'll actually just turn to you, Rashna, as well. And we've heard that you'll be, or the KCD will be partnering with Hollywood talent agency CAA, and it'd be great to hear a bit more about the partnership and how your client roster will be able to benefit from this going forward.
Sure. It's a joint venture that we've gone into with them. And basically the idea was, they were launching their fashion division, which focuses on representing a lot of models and talent and designers, et cetera. And wanted to, I have a long history with them, so wanted to just talk about the industry and what's happening. And from there, we realized there's a lot of opportunity here. A lot of brands need guidance on, again, how to find a new audience. Retail is going through such a struggle in general that, are there new partnerships or opportunities where someone from, CAA's world or our world can come together? And, CAA represents talent, but they also, represent talent to make books, to make films, to make, right? So there's sports, so there's a lot of areas amongst what they do that could be of interest for a brand to really diversify. And, it's really not just for our clients. I mean, honestly, we're looking at the industry as a whole. And if there are opportunities for, great brands to find a new way of getting their content out there, there's such a lack of great fashion content in the world. I mean, for all of us who are stuck at home and, scrolling through Netflix and Amazon and all of that, it's kind of shocking how little fashion content is available on these kinds of platforms, so that's an obvious opportunity. But I think, what's great is that they know their world so well, we know our world so well, and hopefully together it can just, you're not wondering how do I get there, right? The avenue is clear. We know the path forward and how to make things happen if the opportunity can exist.
That's great. At least they know, having launched that, there's the opportunity, and just, it's exciting to see what will come up for the rest of the year going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great, guys. We've actually run out of time. I didn't realize that we'd completely gone off on some nice tangents. We got some good insights. So what we'll do is, instead of launching into a Q&A, we'll get anyone who has a question to email them in, and we'll be sure to answer them. And we'll pop that up on Launchmetrics social media as well. So really enjoyed today's session. I honestly loved getting the different perspectives from you all. And thank you so much for giving us your insight, and from different corners of the world as well. Enjoy the rest of the summit. And thank you, guys. Chat to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.